Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just vile and base.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello, peoples, and welcome to another episode of Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. I am your host for the day, Ryan Siebold, and with me, as always, is a man who recently started a retirement home for old, aging WWE wrestlers, Mr. Jason Peters.
What's up, Ryan? Yeah.
There he is. Oh, man, he's getting into character.
Always, man, always. You know, I like to bring the heat to, well, the podcast, but also to the ring, if we're going to keep this little metaphor going.
The cream rises to the top, baby. The cream rises to the top. I appreciate you. Yeah.
I know that reference. I get that.
The cream rises to the top.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. That's a classic.
Absolutely. But yeah, man, look, you know, community centers, retirement homes, these are all, look, I hate to be coldly cynical, coldly business-minded, right? But I am here to you today.
Be stone cold, Jason. Be stone cold.
But I am here to you today as a businessman, and so I'll be playing that role. And so, yes, we had looked at retirement homes, and we decided, first of all, that there's a lot of space here to make some serious money. And we decided two things. One, we didn't want to be evil. We know there's a lot of evil retirement homes out there. We are not one of them, so you can feel safe leaving grandma or grandma here with us, especially if they like to get down and dirty with some wrestling, because we decided, hey, look, one of the main killers of old age, etc., is a sedentary lifestyle, right? Like we hear it all the time these days from all of these health gurus, especially as you get older, the importance of staying active, right? Of both mind, body, and hopefully spirit as well.
Correct.
And so we thought, well, look, what better way to engage the right brain creativity with the left brain, you know, sort of public speaking skills, etc., and then on top of all of that, throw in physical activity, you know, hitting the trifecta that these people need, and was just sitting there ideating, and it was like, boom, wrestling, of course, right?
Wrestling.
You've got, you know, we've got these built-in storylines and so we've actually got some writers, right? So there are, unfortunately, some of the people who maybe they've had certain illnesses from their past. We actually got this one guy, James, he's a bodybuilder, and he suffered an injury many years ago. So he's actually not able to participate in the actual wrestling. So we actually have him as one of our staff writers. So that's really the great thing about the WWE Wrestling Foundation homes for elderly people. That's a hell of an acronym. I know we're working on that.
It's getting old with a storyline. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. We're able to engage some of the people physically. There's room for everyone, is my point. If you can't be a wrestler, you can be a writer. If you can't be a writer, you can be, help us market, promote. Room for everybody.
Hey, look, as you get older, too, you tend to dress with a lot of flair and panache.
Absolutely.
Feather boas everywhere. I could only imagine. Like the
And it's very funny, too, because, a lot of these people, like we've got this one lovely woman. She's about 87. Her name is Maud. And she actually wore a lot of that stuff back in the day, like sort of like the floofy sort of scarves and all those sort of things.
Sure.
And so, she just sort of had that in her wardrobe. And so very quickly we saw an opening like, oh, Maud, you've got to be our costume person, right? You're a fit for wardrobe. And so she was able to bring in the costuming, and she's really developed out a lot of the outfits that are available since then with a lot of the other people. She's doing great.
Yeah, I mean, some of the little spandex mankinis probably a little awkward once the Viagra kicks in, though. Just
no, but dude,
to your point earlier,
they don't care anymore. They're so past. They're not self-conscious
true.
at all, man. Like they've had their bodies seen and explored by people over the last 60 something years. They're not shy. You know, they've all got sort of, you know, different ailments and everyone sort of understands where they are in life. So there's a lot of acceptance, you know, and everybody's sort of able to see past some of the obvious unpleasantries to really what's, you know, what else is there that they can appreciate.
Now, I know we got a movie to discuss, but before we get to it, I do want to kind of just dig a little deeper into this and just, I'm curious, maybe.
let's keep tearing this tuna can open, baby. What else is in here?
Right. I want to know, like, maybe you could tell me a little bit about some of the activities that you have planned for some of the ailing old wrestlers, you know, like, do they do bingo or karaoke or you know, is there golf or.
Ryan. No, everything that you're saying right now is what every other retirement home has to offer. That we would never separate ourselves by doing what everyone else is doing.
So what sets you guys apart? Like
so look, what it is once a week, every Friday night, we have a big performance. And so kind of think of it a little bit like, you know how like Saturday Night Live, right? It's a weekly performance. They obviously go on Saturday night. And it's just this run where the previous 6 days are all just practicing, rehearsing, writing, preparing for that live show on Saturday. Very much the same thing. We just go up on Fridays.
Are you doing cabaret? Are you doing WWE cabaret?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if you've watched WWE recently, but it's pretty much cabaret as it is. I mean, dude, they literally had Billy Corgan writing storylines for them for like.
That's a good point.
Yeah, or maybe it was like the TNF or whatever the more southern one is than WWE. But like, yeah, no, I mean, I've always said that wrestling is soap opera for males, right? It's all just made up storylines, practicing, you know, and it's always the most salacious stuff like, hey, I'm challenging you to the ring because you slept with my wife, right? And then the wife comes out and it's like, she didn't sleep with me. I'm her twin sister. What? And it's like, this is a soap opera.
This is a telenovela, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, man, I can only hope as I get older in the not so distant future, I will end up at your cabaret-filled, telenovela-soaked WWE retirement home. Sounds like a fantastic time.
What would your wrestling name be? What would your character be?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Maybe the Grand Poobah.
The Grand
I like that.
Poobah.
Yeah, like Fred Flintstone was, you know, in the Flintstones, he was the.
So you would dress like
that.
Fred Flintstone?
I would, with little horns on the hat, you know, and I would come out, you know, all stout.
That's great. That's good. For
around.
some reason, what came to my mind is the Great Ryanardo, and you kind of have a very like Salvador Dali kind of style of presentation.
Ooh, with the big mustache,
exactly,
with the big, pencil
curly
twisted
mustache. I see you in like a top
that.
hat. That's kind of a little bit crooked, but also still wearing like a full-on suit, but then maybe with some like purple and yellow sashes and shit.
Basically, you've just described me as Waluigi. I'm the Great Ryanardo.
with a fair amount of Liberace thrown in for good measure.
With a big boa, with a big feather boa, little flare.
Exactly.
No shirt, just some panties on. All right, Jason, well, we got a movie to discuss. That's what the listeners are here for. What are we talking about? What are we here for? What are we doing today? Jason, why don't you give us a little info, give us a little skinny on the movie we're talking about.
I thought this was what we were here for. I thought we were just doing nonsense for, hours at a time. No?
Yeah, but now we're doing like focused nonsense about a specific
movie
film.
Nonsense. I see. Okay, hold on. In that case, let me get on my movie announcer voice and really lean into the nonsense. From Google, after returning home from the Vietnam War, veteran Jacob Singer, played by Tim Robbins, struggles to maintain his sanity. Plagued by hallucinations and flashbacks, Singer rapidly falls apart as the world and people around him morph and twist into disturbing images as he descends into madness.
There it is. I love it. And what's the name of this film we're talking about?
It's a little something called whatever the hell. But Ryan, No, it's called Jacob's Ladder. I probably should have mentioned that at the top of the show. But, you know, look, the people, they see the titles when they press the play. They know what they're here for. We pretend like they don't. Like we're doing a big reveal. Huh? What movie are they going to do? What movie are they? They know because it's on the title. But anyways, we're doing Jacob's Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder. Where were you when they built that ladder to heaven, as Trey and Matt taught us?
Freedom costs $1.05. So Ryan, with that being said, I got to know, baby, I just got to know, what did you think about this movie?
Jason, I would love to tell you right after this trailer for Jacob's Ladder.
Every day, Jacob Singer goes to work.
What's wrong?
It's one of those days.
And every day, he wonders what is happening to him.
Maybe it's the pressure, Jake.
They're like demons, Jess. They weren't human.
What were they, Jake? Let me look at your hand. You have a very strange line. See, according to this, you're already dead.
Something's wrong, Jake. They're coming after me. I don't know who they are or what they are, but they're gonna get me, and I'm scared, Jake. I've seen them too. Maybe the demons are real.
It's running 106 feet.
This is barbaric. I can get rid of the demons. Who are you? I can block the ladder. Where are you taking me? Where am I?
Where do you want to go?
Home.
This is your home. You're dead.
I'm not dead.
What are you then?
I'm alive.
All right, Ryan, so we're here to discuss Jacob's Ladder, and discuss this movie we will, because I don't know how you felt about this, but I was very conflicted about this movie.
Me too.
I still kind of am. I can say it was certainly disappointing. I'm not certain exactly to what degree, because I do think it's at least okay, and there are elements of the film that I do like, but I just feel like fundamentally at its core, there's something about this film, the way that it was completed, that just kind of doesn't work or is unsatisfying, and I'm looking forward to kind of exploring that with you over the course of the episode. It sounds like your reaction was similar.
Similar. Yeah, this was a weird one. There are parts of this movie I love.
Sure.
In fact, I gave, you're going to find out at the end of this episode, I gave this a fairly positive review. There are parts of this movie that I did not like. And this was kind of a hard one for me to work through because, as always, the purpose of this show isn't to just say I liked it or didn't like it, but to really force ourselves to look in the mirror and say, why? Why didn't you like it? What about this didn't you like? Or what about this did you love?
Yeah.
And it was kind of hard for me to nail down. I did come up with a few semi-reasonable responses. I also have some questions for you along the way that I will, because I'm still trying to suss it all out myself. So sometimes the best I could do is be like, just ask Jason. Maybe he'll give you the answers.
And if not, we'll work through it here together.
Correct. This may be more of a workshop than a film discussion. So, but I overall, it was, definitely interesting. I respect this movie for some of the chances it took. It was definitely unique in the perspective on death and the near death experience and seeing the white light and all of that. I just think it's one of those frustrating experiences. I'm trying to think of what there have been some other movies that we've discussed on this show, maybe even in my 5 minutes, where I almost get mad when a movie gets so close to greatness.
Yeah.
Like I would almost rather it suck.
Yeah, for sure.
and be like a shitty B movie or just embrace the cheesiness or schlockiness or whatever. This movie was for me, really close to great, but some of the shortcomings just kind of lost it for me because I was like, come on, it's anyway.
Yeah. Well, and we'll discuss exactly what may have led to some of those decisions. I think this is a film that ultimately, I don't know how much research you were able to do about the original script and Adrain Lyne's involvement and how it kind of changed
Sure.
the project and all of that. But I really do feel that ultimately he probably wasn't the greatest choice for this type of script, just because it does seem like a lot of what was fundamentally at the core of the script was what Lynn took issue with and wanted to change. And he did introduce some elements of the film that really work, but you almost get the sense that you wish he would have left these things intact and changed some of these other things instead of just, you know, so it's like, I feel like it was very much sort of like a one step forward, one step back kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll just jump right into it and say that, you know, without getting too far down the line, I love Adrain Lyne's take on the obscurity of some of these evils that he's showing us, and his take on not just giving away the bag by showing us all, you know, straight ahead. Because it's my understanding that like some of the things in the original script were very literal, very demon.
Yeah.
You know, the imagery was very demon based and angel based and stuff like that. It was very on the nose. And Adrain decided to, you know, dial some of that back and leave it very obscure and lean more into the feelings and overall vibes of the moment instead of just giving it away, you know, and making it a straight ahead horror film. That I agree with. Like, that worked for me. I love that. I love the obscurity. I love wondering what the fuck the whole time, you know, kind of being in the dark and the breadcrumbs he's giving away. But then, you know, a lot of the department heads I had a problem with. Like, you know, we're going to get into the music, for example, or Tim Robbins. He gets heralded for this performance as he took a lot of chances stepping away from some of his lighter fare and comedy beats to go into a dramatic role and borderline horror. And, you know, some of the things he did worked for me. A lot of the things he did not work for me.
Sure.
I'm going to be in the minority by saying that because all the research that I did, people really gave him his roses for this performance. But
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you will not find me disagreeing.
I kind of feel like
with
it was
you.
like almost there, but it just didn't quite land with me. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to work through it though.
We'll discuss here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I just need a good place for us to start our discussion, Ryan.
At the beginning, and by the way, at the beginning of this movie was our good old friends Carol Co.
Yes.
Jason. I love that.
Carol Co. and TriStar coming together.
Oh, yes.
Get the brilliance of the
Chef's kiss.
Pegasus or unicorn. I always forget which one it is. And yes, of course, the infamous Carol Co. If you don't know about Carol Co., research them. Hell of a story there.
There's a whole ass documentary about them. Did you ever see that documentary?
No, I didn't.
Oh, dude, fantastic shit.
Nice. I'll definitely check that out. So yeah, after we get those wonderful intros, we open on a wide shot of helicopters at Magic Hour. They are in Vietnam. We soon learn that they are carrying soldiers. We're also seeing that there's a very sort of soft hallmark to the imagery. That's going to be something of a distinction of Adrain Lyne's movies. Now, we quickly see that the soldiers are resting. They're joking around, having a good time. We're informed that it's 1971. And among other people, we see a very young Ving Rhames who stuck out, as well as a very young Tim Robbins. He's, you know, they're sort of joshing him. Tim Robbins, that is, he appears to be some sort of sergeant general, perhaps. Maybe he's just another soldier. Either way, they're joshing him as he walks back from the jungle when all of a sudden the soldiers are suddenly and violently attacked. It's fairly graphic, the injuries that we see taking place. There's a lot of dismemberment and goring. And, you know, some of the soldiers are kind of having like a freak out moment where they're starting to sort of like grab their head and spin around in place. So we're not really sure what's going on there at first. And we see that Jacob, our main character, Jacob, played by the young Tim Robbins, is sneaking through the jungle when he's attacked by a bayonet, disemboweled. And we immediately jump cut to that same person, Jacob, but he's on a subway in postal worker attire, and he's seeming to wake up from some sort of dream. Now, Ryan, I do just want to mention, because like I said, I do have a lot of issues with this film, but there is one shot in particular that I thought really, really worked for me that was very much a sort of almost like a jump scare of sorts, but like cinematically through the camera. And that's the scene where Tim Robbins is attacked, because it sort of shows everything from a series of what I guess we'll call third-person vantage points, right? It's sort of traditional, mise-en-scène with regards to, setting up a wide shot and cutting and showing the jungles and some close-ups and this and that. And so then we get this wide shot where Tim Robbins is, again, creeping through the jungle, and we sort of think that it's just a wide shot like any other. And then all of a sudden the camera moves forward and like darts forward, and we realize that it actually wasn't a like third person POV shot. It was actually like a first person representing the soldier that was like hiding and coming out. And so I thought that was a really cool sort of like visual camera based cinematic fake out that really caught me by surprise. So again, I'm going to be very critical of this film. So it's like, hey, I at least wanted to give you a couple compliments here and there where I could find them. So let me give you some props for that. That moment really worked for me.
Dude, there were a lot of little moments that worked for me. It's the big stuff kind of that didn't work for me, I guess. Like the next scene that we're getting to with him waking up on the subway, as he goes down the train, there's a woman sitting there and he's asking, do we pass my stop? I fell asleep, my bad. Did we pass this stop? And she's not answering, and he's like, all right, well, fuck it, I guess. And he gets off on the next stop. That was his stop. He did not miss his stop. But then as he looks back at the train, the woman is just staring at him, and her eyes are like, she must be wearing some black contacts or something. And this happens a couple times throughout the film because she's staring at him with these dead eyes. And and then as he's getting off the plane, he sees like a homeless person or someone of lesser means or whatever, all bundled up in a jacket and sleeping on the train. And then like this person has a meaty tail of sorts. It almost looks like a penile or phallic representation, and it like slowly tucks up underneath the overcoat, kind of letting you know that some surreal shit is going to be happening throughout the film. It sets the tone, kind of lets you know what kind of movie this is going to be. But that woman's eyes really kind of spooked me out. There's like these little creepy moments that left you unsettled. And on that level, I think the movie really succeeds. And it sets the tone right out the gate. This is what kind of movie it's going to be. And I was all in.
And funny thing about that moment with the tail, so they originally, when they filmed that, they actually designed it to where the tail it had like a trigger, some sort of air-based trigger, and the tail actually popped out. But then when they were in editing, they realized like, oh, you know what? It actually might be creepier if it like contracts into itself. Like it's like it's got something to hide almost, and it's trying to hide itself, right? Instead of like trying to like jump out and grab at him. So they actually just reversed the footage and had it run backwards so that it drew into itself.
Sure. I agree. I think at this point in the beginning of the film, pulling back and being like, no, you don't get to see that yet. Like, I think that's kind of a better way to go about things.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's not really going to be like it's not a funhouse ride of a film. It's not like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff jumping out. Nah, it's crazy terror, screams, whatever. No, like it's trying to be a cerebral mindfuck film of, what's really going on and what's reality and what's not, et cetera, et cetera. But, and let me just ask you, so because, again, I don't really know a better way to describe it than just like mindfuck, right? Like, because that's what we all know. So that's what this film is trying to be, is that type of film. Do you think that because pretty much every decision that's made is in service of that general idea or tone or aesthetic or concept, however you want to refer to it, do you think that the film works? Do you think that it works as a mindfuck film? Or do you think it half works?
Half works.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? And
I mean,
what parts?
I kind of guessed what was going on.
Well, you knew this. I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, you're a huge "How Did This Get Made" fan, and Jason Mantzoukas is constantly talking
Jason
about.
Mantzoukas ruined this movie.
There's an entire YouTube videos explaining his Jacob's Ladder thing.
Is this a Jacob's Ladder scenario?
Correct.
He always asks, about stupid movies, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw this coming, and then, but there were I knew the gist, but I didn't know how or why or what, and so the movie still succeeded for me, even though I knew, this was kind of what it was. And then even in the description of the film, it talks about this being a PTSD based film and so on. So, yeah, it just, I kind of wasn't sure how the reveal was going to play out and then, there are a lot of red herrings, lots of ham-fisted red herrings that are red herrings, but I'm so distracted by the red herrings trying to figure out what the fuck that is. Like why, that now I'm not paying attention to the movie. So I think it was maybe it was trying too hard to be a psychological thriller or a mind fuck, as you were saying, that, then the movie just like what could have been a great narrative and told an awesome story gets lost into being an M. Night Shyamalan ripoff kind of film thing, right? Like,
sure. Well,
I'm only using that as like a trope, but we get what that means.
And I think we can go ahead and just call it out, because since it is a known thing, for anyone that doesn't know, when Jason Mantzoukas and other people refer to a Jacob's Ladder scenario, they're referring to any scenario wherein the entire storyline is a reflection of a dying person's last thoughts or imagination or whatever, right? Like that's a known thing that's out there now. When Jason Mantzoukas says Jacob's Ladder scenario, that's what he's talking about. So
sure.
So acknowledging that, I think that it makes sense to then look at how much that does or doesn't work and how much it does or doesn't set up the film for success. And what I mean by that is, for me, again, one of our favorite expressions here on the show is how much meat was on this bone, right? And at the end of the day, very little. I think that if you want to be a puzzle box of a film, David Fincher could do something like that really well. There's a number of people that can do that very well and keep you guessing, but you've really got to play into the more mystery aspects of it. The problem where you're basically doing a movie where everything is not happening, it's just the thoughts and imagination of one person, is at that point, it really needs to become a fun house ride, because none of this is real. There's no great mystery.
Right.
It's not going to amount to a big payoff with an antagonist, or if it does, again, it's going to be a fake payoff because it's all in this person's head, right? And so at that point, really your job is just to entertain and give me a bunch of visual and aural stimulation and set mood and tone and atmosphere and just fuck with me, right? What's there, what's not, just really have fun with that concept, because again, there's no mystery because all of this is just made up. And so that was, I think, my biggest problem with the film is
that it's all a dream.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's the whole thing where like your protagonist wakes up at the end of it is like, oh, wipe sleepy eyes. I had the craziest dream.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. It's Who Shot JR from Dynasty, from Dallas, right? It's like, the fuck? And then, dude goes into the shower and the woman's there. Like, I just...
What's Family Guy?
Yeah. So I just, when you're going to do an It's All a Dream movie, that is... thin ice you're walking on with me narratively. Like, that's such a cop-out trope.
Totally. And then that's the thing is, so at that point, because look, what's awesome about dreams, right? Surreality, fantastic imagery, bizarre juxtapositions of things that don't belong together, right? So then play into that. Give me those things. Go full Salvador Dali, right?
Or David Lynch.
Or any of these guys, right? So because again, like...
Our buddy Crohn's should have directed
You don't
this.
need to focus on the story because there's nothing there. There is no story. The story is that there's no story. So, okay, let's just have fun with this,
Right.
And
let's trip people out.
Yeah.
Let's consistently pull the rug out from them. Let's trip them out. Let's show them some bizarre ass shit. And they got to some of that. Like, there were moments in this movie I was all in.
Sure.
But then there were moments that they were asking me to care about characters or go down the road, and like when all the Vietnam vets were getting together and trying to, figure it out together and like go and do the lawsuit and all of that. None of that mattered.
Yeah, they just cut that off, right? It's like, why did you even get Jason Alexander for this role? I don't know if he was anybody at the time, but it's like, hey, here's a scene. Let's set this up. Just kidding. It's not really actually. Nothing's happening. And it's like, yeah, that was super strange.
Well, and this is why I didn't want to bring this up at the top, because all I'm going to do is go on a rant for 45 minutes and spoil the whole movie. We don't have to go down through the rabbit hole of the movie narratively like we normally do, because I'm just going to go scene by scene and just shit on it, or go through and celebrate it, because I do think it deserves both. But
but there are still elements of the film that we can discuss. So, like, for example, right now we've just gotten through the train, and then he ends up getting off of the train, right? And he doesn't recognize where he is, so he's wandering through the tracks, and then he ends up like being on the tracks, and then dives away at the last minute to look up at the train and see these faceless people, which is always kind of an interesting thing. And then I think that's also when we sort of introduced the sort of shaky head thing that they've got going on, which we actually saw in Old Boy just a couple weeks prior, when he goes crazy at the beginning with the ants.
Sure. Dude, I didn't even think about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, from there, he goes home to the lovely Elizabeth Pena, who does a great job in this and pretty much anything that she's in. She's in a small apartment, and we have a quick shot of it cutting back to him dying at Vietnam. So that's going to be, again, one of those sort of like quote unquote breadcrumbs, of which it's not, still pretty shallow. We cut back to the apartment. Jacob's looking through old pictures of his family, and we learn that he had a son that died when he was very young, which really happened. Son played by pre-Home Alone Macaulay Culkin, by the way. Obviously, no one's going to be shocked by that if you've seen the film. And he also has 2 other children and a wife. So, they are still sort of giving us some information about who this guy is. After that, of course, is when Elizabeth Pena's character, Jezebel, by the way, pretty on the nose there, burns the pics in an incinerator. And then we also get introduced after that to Danny Aiello's character, Lewis, who's one of the more interesting characters. And this is where those sort of remnants of that more traditional good versus evil supernatural starts to come into play, because you have Elizabeth Pena, who's sort of supposed to represent the dark, right? And to the point that she's named Jezebel, and she's supposed to inhabit that.
Her name is Jezebel. Oh, it's so ham-fisted, right? And he's calling her Jezzy, like that's gonna her name's like that's gonna be a big pay. No, it's not a payoff.
Well, no, but he acknowledges that right at the top, because he says something to the effect of like, it's super funny that you're not religious given your name. Jezebel's from the Bible, right, or something like that. He says,
but that's the ham-fisted shit I'm talking about. He's like already winking and nudging. We have Michael the archangel. We have Gabriel, which is an angelic name, protector name. Of course, Jacob, which is biblical.
Sure.
Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob's ladder, which is the ladder ascending to heaven. These are all biblical allegories.
Yes.
All throughout. Even his wife Sarah was the wife of Abraham, who begat Isaac, and all these things. So, my Christian school days, I might be a little off on a couple of these things, but they were just like ding, ding, ding all the way through. I'm like, really heavy into the biblical allegories here.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that, because that's basically coming from the script, which was written by a guy named Bruce Joel Rubin. Did you happen to see this guy's resume?
I did. It's
all over the place.
Pretty all over the map. Guy crushed it with Ghost right after this. And which is funny, because I guess he struggled to get this movie made, because, a lot of studio heads were like, nobody wants a ghost story. And then Carol Go picks it up, gives them $25 million. They go get this done. And then right after this, he sets box office, bonanzas with Ghost and Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. So he proved them wrong. Good on him. And then he goes on to write things like Stuart Little 2. So, okay.
Yep. He also did Deep Impact and the movie My Life with Michael Keaton, which is a devastating film, but very good.
Yes. I haven't seen that in a long time. It's been a minute, but I have seen it.
Yeah, it's a good one. But let me ask you, so in terms of just, I know we kind of already talked about the specific twist and how that kind of left us hanging, but what did you think about those different aspects along the way, like the supernatural stuff? Like, do you think that, because look, let's just set this stage real quick. So in the original script, there's a lot more supernatural references. We talked about the biblical references right now.
Sure.
There are like literal devils and angels in the script. And not only that, but there's also these like interdimensional voids and things of that nature. And Lynn got rid of all of that, right? And because he felt that obscure ideas were less scary than tangible body horror. And that's kind of why he wanted to lean into it, because he wanted to make ultimately a scary film. And so he thought that instead of, okay, making them literal devils, let's just give, the nurse some malformed half horns and make it look kind of fleshy and go more Cronenberg with it. So you get this sort of dichotomy and almost juxtaposition between the way that Lyne wants to portray things in the original script. So do you think that Lynn's changes were wise, or would you have liked to have seen it stay more in that original lane?
No, I think Lynn's changes were wise, especially, and let's keep this in mind, they had a Carolco budget of $25 million.
Sure.
So, unless they were just going to go full Cronenberg and really lean into that, like you said, the body horror, or even David Lynch, and getting really obscure and weird with some of the characters and stuff like that. They could have gone that way with it, but, no, I think this worked in that regard. I think, man, this one's a hard one for me to suss out, but maybe it was just that you would barely dip your toe in those waters and then it would go right back into a veteran dealing with PTSD and his relationship with his ex-wife and missing his child. And look, I get it that the whole thing dials back to the last thoughts of a moment before death by Jacob, right? So He's dying and he's trying to come to terms with his successes and failures in his life so that he could let go and ascend to the great beyond. So that's what this movie's about. And so as such, you're going to have things like family drama that he's trying to cope with and deal with. It can't all be aliens and grotesque creatures and demons and aliens. It's got to be, because it's a person that's dying. It's a human. And so we're going to deal with a lot of human elements and love and sadness and grief and the letting go of life. And I think those moments work, but I didn't really know what this was. Like, it just kind of like, it was genreless in a way, because I was never really, like, I was going down the horror route and I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Like, we get to the party scene with Jesse and stuff like that. Like, that was trippy. Dude, those faceless creatures in the car were sick. I love what they did with that. That was so weird. I was so weirded out by that. And like, the Michael character was warning him, we have Jacob walking down an alleyway and then a car is all of a sudden turns the corner and starts chasing Jacob down. This character, Michael, that I think is his first appearance in the film, comes around the corner, says, look out. And, Tim Robbins very goofily runs and kind of zigzags away. He's not a very, he's kind of a goofy dude.
Well, he's super like uncoordinated, because he was like 6'3" or something, and like, especially when he was younger, I don't think he really had grown into his body, so it's kind of like gangly and like just he looks uncoordinated.
Yes. So he jumps out of the way, and then as he looks at the car that's passing, it's all these like weird, obscure, almost like that painting, The Scream, with the guy holding his cheeks, looking. They almost kind of look like that character, and I just that kind of stuff worked for me. I like that. I like the woman with the gypsy woman with the black eyes on the subway. I like the tail, coming back under the. I liked all that. I like the horns on the woman at the psychiatrist's office, with the gross on her head, and then she puts her hat back on and stuff. Alluding to horror is okay. I'm okay with some of that stuff, but then we just like spend these long stretches of time of Jacob kind of just lamenting his past life with his family and dealing with Jesse, kind of being rude and abrupt with him, or not being very empathetic to what he's going through with his PTSD, and trying to come to terms with the Vietnam vets, and all these things that just kind of made the film drag to me, I think, a little bit. The pacing of this film was really off. What are your thoughts on that? You think I'm getting somewhere?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's definitely merit to that. I think that, like I said,
you're going to be like my film therapist for the next hour, because I'm just going to come to you and like try to work this out.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of, like I said, just a bunch of disparate elements and not really being on the same page with the direction. I think that's where you get a sort of discord of harmony, if you will, between the direction and the script and the acting and the cinematography. Almost like one of those things where rather than like you couldn't get a team on the same page to execute the same vision. And so you had to be like, okay, look, we'll give you this thing and you this thing and you this thing. And so like everybody gets to do what they want, but then it's not a cohesive finished product. It's more just a
that is a great point.
You know?
That is a great point. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of genres being covered here.
Yeah.
Because there's drama. There's all the sad stuff with his, him missing his family and all of that. There's the action sequences. There's the horror elements and suspense and stuff.
Even the cinematography, it feels like an erotic thriller that would be on like Skinamax or something like that. The acting is not particularly great. As Elizabeth Pena said, her character is kind of written to have like every single emotion, which kind of makes it hard to identify who or what she's about, because she can be crazy and loving and tender and harsh and so, having her sort of zigzag.
Yeah, she was all over the map.
But again, she's made up. So what does it matter? You can do whatever you want with her, right?
Right. And none of it matters. Yeah. And that's my point.
Yeah.
None of it matters.
I also want to say, so let's just, to your point, after he's chased by the car, he does go to the psych hospital. He's trying to visit his old doctor. He's not there. The nurse shows no record. That's where you kind of see those horns that the nurse has. And after Jacob freaks out and rushes to the room, he's sort of informed by a doctor that, he's dead. So again, all of this stuff in retrospect, it's all made up stuff so they can just do whatever they want. It doesn't have to really mean anything. And again, none of that is inherently interesting. But then you get to the following scene where they're at the party. This is where all the weird shit happens, right? Where even at the beginning, when he opens up the fridge to grab a beer or whatever it is, and there's like this weird, giant oversized eagle's skull or something, or I don't know what the hell it was. Might have been a horse skull. And then he's getting his palm read. And once again, through that character, the writer informs us that like this guy's already dead because she's reading his palm and she's like, oh, look at that, it says here you're already dead. So again, like there's not really that much mystery here. We get it. So it's like, okay, dude's dead. So like then come with the weird shit. And then this scene that's where he has the sort of like hallucination on the dance floor and Jezzy's straight up like copulating with some like evil winged demon from beyond. And we're seeing some like flashes of appendages and her grinding on it and stuff like that. But we're not really sure what's going on. And then I think she gets like some sort of spike or tail through the face or through the mouth or something like that.
Yeah, like a horn comes out of her mouth as she's about to climax almost. Yeah.
And then that's where we get the whole thing where it's like they return him to the apartment and he has a fever of 106. And again, like he doesn't. So what do I care in retrospect? Even if I was engaged in the moment, as soon as the movie's over, I'm like looking back and going like, well, shit, that meant nothing. Because again, it was a made up. So, but rather than just, continue to harp on that for the next hour, let's kind of talk about some of the other things. So again, I made reference to the fact earlier that this kind of feels like an erotic thriller that would have been made in the 80s, of which Adrain Lyne has done many of. That's what he's known for, 9.5 weeks and stuff like that.
It's a great success.
How did the look of the film, which by the way, I don't know where you watched this. I actually watched this on an old standard def disc that I had. Apparently I bought this film way back in the day and completely forgot and never watched it because I was digging through my box and like, there it was. And I was like, oh shit. But like, this is totally one of those films that was made in 1990 going on 1974. Like, I really expected a very young Al Pacino to pop out. Like, it was so grainy and so dull. And I was like, it's like, this is really what 90s movies looked like? Like, it's constantly shocking how old 90s movies feel now.
I think, the movie takes place in, I think, 75. So, it has a very 70s auteur look to it. But it's weird seeing a horror kind of done this way. Like, but I was in for it because it all takes place in New York. So it kind of has that New York vibe. Like you said, I could see Al Pacino showing up. I could see Gene Hackman showing up. It kind of has a French Connection kind of look, or a Coppola kind of look. It's very mid-70s, even though it was made in 1990. This was shot by Jeffrey Kimball, the guy that shot Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, True Romance, and on and on. He went on to do some slick shit later in his career, like Mission Impossible 2 for John Woo, and Star Trek Nemesis and stuff. So he got into the hyper-saturated world down the way. But it felt very grounded, very unsaturated. It worked for me, I guess. I wasn't wowed by it, but I was along for the ride.
Yeah. I don't know. There was, again, I think it was just one of these instances of the aesthetics not vibing. Again, I just thought, like, for whatever reason, the sort of soft, again, almost erotic look to everything, it wasn't really what this movie called for.
Yeah, I mean, it did kind of have that, like, Vaseline over the lens kind of look sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah, I get it.
And honestly, that's just as a personal aesthetic choice. Like, that's never been my sort of favorite thing. Like, I'm definitely much more of the, like, super clean, like, or like really dark, grainy, gritty type of stuff. So, but yeah, just that whole song, it reminded me of like a little bit of like Zardoz, it's kind of got that feel. And of course, if anybody listening wants to know what we're talking about with regards to how they shot that film and how they got the look, you can go back and listen to that from season 1. But yeah, it definitely had that sort of a vibe to it. So I do like really grainy film stock. I will say that. And especially nowadays where that doesn't exist anymore because we shoot on digital, there's always something very charming about just seeing a super grainy image. But again, there was something about the vibe that didn't match what was going on. And so hard to put my finger on it. Again, the guy's very talented. I think it's just a matter of, again, like the script and the cinematography and the direction just kind of all coming at the film from a different place and not really vibing together.
Right.
Now, we cut to him in bed from there. He's with his ex-wife, and this is where they start to introduce the reality of what's really going on there. We see his dead son, Gabe, and we cut to Nam and see him dying and all of that. But then we also do get like a really nice shot. It's the bathtub shot where there's a really long zoom out and back in on Jacob's face. And Tim Robbins does a really good job of keeping that like very red and glassy sort of look. And you do get the sense that he's sort of like trapped in his own body at that point. And
great shot. Yeah.
Yeah. That was
but let's talk about this for just a quick second, because as he's going into this fever and then he wakes up in bed with his ex-wife, Sarah, and then his dead son is there, who he's acknowledged and talked about and mourned over in previous scenes. They're doing the whole, it was just a dream moment right then. And then that plays out for what is probably realistically 10, 12 minutes or so, maybe. And then he is back in the bathtub and it's like, oh no, that was just a dream. And that was a fever dream. So, they're pulling you in and out of reality so much so that by the end of this film, you don't even know what the fuck is going on. Like, you don't know to this day, I don't even know if the ending in Vietnam is real. Like,
I mean, honestly, I felt the other way because like, I felt like it was very cut and dry. Like they established that all of this is just a certain dream. So, I mean, pretty much everything with Jezebel is made up, a function of his imagination. They do the thing where the dream is the reality, right? So in his dreams that he's having about his ex-wife, this woman, and, his 3 kids, like that's the reality of his situation. He really did have a young son that died, on a bike, got hit by a car or whatever. And really the entire film is very simple, which is just that these soldiers had these experiments done on them and they went crazy and killed each other, which I did think was actually an interesting way to do the same thing. We can touch on that a little bit more a little bit later. And then Tim Robbins dies. And so again, this is just the space between him dying, and losing consciousness.
I get that. Right. And I also get that these moments wouldn't be played out linearly as you're having, as you're dying and the blood is draining from your brain. You're going to be, bopping through all these memories almost like a greatest hits compilation.
Sure.
So, so that part I get. I guess just like narratively from the story, with me as a viewer watching this film, to have your character continuously wake up from and do the whole, it was just a dream moment. Like in this moment, he wakes up in bed with Sarah, his dead kid's there, everything is good. And then he has this full on conversation like, oh, I had the craziest dream. Yeah. I was, having sex with my coworker. And she's like, oh yeah. Was she good? And blah, blah, blah. And they have this like little cute banter back and forth where they rib each other. And then Gabe comes in, Dad, are you okay? And like this whole thing plays out and you're like, okay, that was just, now we're going to go down this road. And then like immediately it pulls you out of that and it's like, boom, now he's back in the bathtub. And that was just a dream. And then he's like, oh, I had the craziest dream. I was just my ex-wife. So it's just like when you're going to continually use that device of it was just a dream to like put me on my back foot so I don't know what's going on. It was almost like it was kind of a cheap cheap way of doing that.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I really feel like a large part of the reason that the film ended that way is because of how much Adrain Lyne affected the screenplay. So, for example, in the original script, like Jesse is a full-on demon, right? And Lewis is a full-on angel. And those things are still alluded to in this script, but they're not fully examined. And so, for example, in the original script, which there is a piece that sort of made it a remnant that I did think was resonant. And it basically talks about how the demons aren't really demons. At the end of the day, when it's revealed, basically the demons are sort of representatives of the afterlife. And depending on how ready you are to progress to that next stage or not, affects how you view them. So basically, like, if you die in a good place and, you know, you die in peace and you're ready to go to the next level, then these entities will present themselves as angels and your family members and all these wonderful things. But if you fear that progression into the next stage of existence, then they will present themselves as demons. And I thought that was a really interesting concept.
I liked it too. Lewis lays this out at the end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3. He talks about that to Jacob as he's after he rescues him from the hospital.
Yeah, what's that's even a remnant of is what I think would have made this film work, which is in the original script. And that's basically the fact that, like, Jesse is, again, a literal demon, and she's basically working to prevent him from moving on, right? And Lewis is an angel who's basically fighting on his behalf to try to get him to move on.
To usher him in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it all leads into a final showdown between Jesse and Jacob. And they actually have some sort of full-on confrontation battle, whatever, which Lyne then removed and sort of half alluded to, but then he does that thing where, you know, it's basically like the Scooby-Doo ending, right? Like he turns Jezebel around and like, oh, it's not Jezebel. It's actually your own face staring back at you, because he wanted to include this ham-fisted metaphor about how his own enemy was really himself.
Got it.
And that's why Lyne made that decision. So he took out a final confrontation with Jezebel and then just put in this quick scene of Tim Robbins turning around, seeing himself. And that's supposed to be our sort of like third act climax. And like, that's not a climax. That's a third act moment, perhaps, but that's, you know.
All right.
And so you took away basically the final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist. And then you're left to wonder why the movie is not as satisfying as it could have been, you know?
Let me ask you real quick. Did you like Tim Robbins in this movie?
No. So here's the thing. I'm actually not as big a fan of Tim Robbins as a lot of people are, just in general. We've talked about his performance in the Hudsucker Proxy, which I found not engaging. I don't think he's a Jim Carrey type of funny man the way that the Coens tried to ask him to be. I thought he was really, I think he plays smart, serious characters really well. So like Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption was a perfect role for Tim Robbins. He was brilliant in it.
Yes.
I can't say that I've seen Bob Roberts or some of his other satirical movies, but I can say that pretty much when I think of like
he was good in Bull Durham.
Yeah. Again, when I think of the perfect role for Tim Robbins, it's Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption. So this didn't really work for me. I think that part of it was just he was still young, so I think he was becoming a better actor. And I think part of it as well is that I don't think that Adrain Lyne is really an actor's director, especially after seeing some of the behind the scenes. So I think that there was, we've talked about this before. Like if you give an artist a certain, creative freedom, that can look really great, right? But sometimes, they need a place to start, especially when it comes to actors, because if, you don't have somebody sitting there watching you telling you to dial it back a little bit, then you get these crazy Nick Cage performances, which is fine, but you got to make sure you're in a Nick Cage movie. But, for me, I always kind of would have liked to have seen more of that energy. I think maybe if it was played a little less straight with a little more emotion. But I also understand, for example, that like a large part of that was at Lynn's direction. He really wanted to make this a quote unquote human movie, that looked at the relationships and the inner turmoil. And
I'm okay with Jacob being endearing and empathetic and going down that road as he's letting go of his past. It's an emotional journey that we're on. I feel like Tim Robbins is too dopey for that. I'm kind of watching some of these moments and I'm not feeling the heartbreak. I'm not going down. I'm not those emotional beats that this movie is filled with. When we're taking a break from the what the fuck moments of the horned women and, coitus on the dance floor with demons, then you're leaving me with emotional beats as this character of Jacob is letting go of his life to ascend into the afterlife in the great beyond, as he was murdered by his own men in cold blood on an acid trip in Vietnam. Okay, that's our story. But when half the movie are these emotional beats and gut-wrenching moments, even when Tim Robbins is crying in bed, mourning his dead son, looking at old photos that had been dropped off at his house, and in the moment we mentioned earlier, I wasn't along for that ride. Like, I didn't really feel it. Like, I don't really feel like Tim Robbins is that kind of an actor to me. Correct. I wasn't really going along that journey. I feel like he's too kind of just dopey and I don't know.
If I might offer a different adjective, I think that he's a very cerebral actor. And so I think that what it is that I think that he lacks a certain, I don't want to say he lacks a certain humanity. That's a bit strong. But I do think that he lacks a certain relatable emotionality, let's say. I don't even know if that's a word, right? But so like when I think of Tim Robbins, I think of somebody who's very cold, who's very calculating. Like Tim Robbins is not going to like put his arm around you when you had a bad day and like, it's all right, buddy. Let's go shake it off. Like he's going to like sit down and lecture you about things. Right. So I think that what it is, again, I think cold is the best thing that I can think of. And so again, that works perfectly for an Andy Dufresne. Like I'm thinking of the moment in the Shawshank Redemption very early on. I think it's the only scene where they show us Andy being on trial, and there's a comment that the attorney makes, and he says to Andy, well, they were never able to find the gun in the river. Don't you think that's a little convenient? And Andy turns around and he says, well, actually, because I'm completely innocent of this crime, I find it decidedly inconvenient. And like, that's Tim Robbins, right? Doesn't put up with shit,
Sure.
Smart dude, intelligent, can hang, not going to get emotionally invested. He's not going to go up and be like, please, you got to let me go. He's just like, no, I didn't do this. Please take me off. What you did is wrong. I didn't do anything. And so again, when you're asking Tim, I don't think Tim Robbins does emotion great. I think he would be great to play those characters that have decidedly lack of emotions, right? The stern father figure that doesn't approve of his son's artistic pursuits and things of that nature. So asking him to do all these very dramatic emotional beats, I don't think works here.
Yeah, I was racking my brain on who I would have rather seen in this film, and I couldn't come up with a better option. Maybe because, like you said, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, so there's a lot going on. Maybe the problem isn't entirely on Tim Robbins' shoulders. Maybe, because we haven't even gotten to the music yet. The music didn't work for me at all.
Ryan, I know, I just have to say this. I know I pitch him as the answer to everything every single time that you ask who should have been in this movie, but our boy Michael Shannon would have crushed this. Absolutely crushed this movie.
He would have. He totes would have.
I don't even know how old he was in 1990, but he would have crushed this movie.
Yeah, he was probably like 17 years old.
Also, let me ask you, have you seen any other Adrian Lyne films?
I have. Yeah, I've seen a lot of them.
So let's see, he's got 5 big ones that I noticed here, which would be Flashdance, Fatal Attraction, 9.5 Weeks, Indecent Proposal, and Unfaithful.
Yep.
Which I've actually heard Unfaithful is a really good movie. But have you seen any or all 5 of those?
I have. I have seen all 5 of those movies.
Wow, that's crazy. I have not seen any of those movies. So are they good movies?
For what they are, for their genre, yes.
So you would say that Adrian Lyne's a good director?
For what he does, yes. Now, I will also add, I have not seen these movies in a long time. Like, these are movies that were big in the 90s, or for me, is when I kind of came to watch a lot of these movies in the 90s, and I haven't really gone back to watch them. But yeah, I think that, as far as that, sultry thriller that was big in those days, you had movies like Jade, and some of these other things. I think that he handled that pretty well. Man, I haven't seen Flashdance in forever. That was huge back in the day.
Do you know, by the way, that I have never seen Flashdance? And furthermore, not only have I not seen it, but I am constantly getting it confused with Footloose.
Right. I think that's a fair... I mean, they're 80s dance movies. You know what I mean?
Sure. Flashdance is the one with Swayze, right?
Flashdance is not the one with Swayze.
Oh. No, that's... Okay, that is... So then that's Footloose.
No. Footloose is Kevin Bacon,
Really?
the greatest actor of all time.
Oh, wow. So he just did Dirty Dancing?
You're thinking of Dirty
it?
Dancing has Dirty Dancing has Swayze.
Wow. And of course Ghost, written by our boy here.
Sure, right.
Huh,
yeah.
no, that's
but if you're
crazy.
talking early to mid 80s dance-based films, no, Flashdance has Jennifer Beals.
Okay.
And that kind of put her on the map as like a 80s sultry hot chick, as an exotic dancer of sorts. That's the one that Deadpool parodies when she's on the chair.
Yeah,
and
where she draws the
up her
rope
hips,
and the
then the water falls on her and the whole bit. Yeah, that's
definitely.
Flashdance.
By the way, like, how have we never had, I don't know, a sketch, a film, any sort of like reunion 30 years later where Patrick Swayze and Kevin Bacon have a dance-off? I feel like we missed the boat on being able to do that while we could. That would have been money.
Yeah. I mean, that's how Guardians ends, the dance-off, for emulating the greatest actor of all time, Kevin Bacon, who reprises his role in Guardians Holiday Special, which I don't think you've seen, but it's fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah. And then you got Footloose, which is Kevin Bacon, who can't dance because John Lithgow is actively, conservatively banning dancing in the town.
Is that really what
Dancing
that movie's
is
about?
Yes.
Oh man, they don't make fucking movies. That movie's Lockout at the Rec Center? That's what that movie is?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Yeah, Kevin Bacon comes into town and he's like, and then John Lithgow's like, all these kids and their hip thrusting and this and that, and he tries to ban dancing. And then there's the scene where like Kevin Bacon has to come to terms with his shit, and then like he's dancing all over
you can't stop my
the
dancing.
warehouse, the abandoned warehouse, and then of course you have the Kenny Loggins song that everybody.
So is that who Jimmy Jr. is based off of from Bob's Burgers? He's Kevin Bacon. You can't stop my dancing. Okay, Dad.
I hadn't even thought about that until right this very minute. But yeah, that's the deal.
Oh man, I gotta go back and watch that movie. I'm gonna fucking hate it, but I still gotta do it.
You gotta hate that movie, yes.
And now a quick word from our sponsor.
Well, hello there, good sir and madam. Welcome to Baron Pennington's House of Nothing. I am Mr. Pennington. How may I help you today?
Well, my wife and I are in a bit of a bind, you see. We've been all over town looking for items of absolutely no value. And despite our best efforts, everything we've come across possesses some sort of function and worth.
It's quite aggravating, really. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your much-deserved frustrations, but you've come to the right place. I specialize in wares that carry no intrinsic value whatsoever. I'm certain we can find exactly what you're looking for.
That's what the last guy said.
Tried to convince us that string doesn't have a purpose. Can you imagine? String? Yes, well, that really is more of a mainstream offering. Thankfully, I carry exotic nothings from far across the lands. Perhaps I can interest you in this, an inflated plastic Ziploc bag. That does seem pretty useless.
Inflated, you say? With what?
The air of a young immigrant, sir. I watched him breathe heavily into it myself. Took 7 strong-willed attempts to get the maximum amount of inflation you see here before you today.
7 attempts? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, that's far too much inflation. No. Imagine if I were drowning. I could use that air to keep myself alive for several extra few minutes.
Indeed, of course, sir. You and your wife are most discerning on the matters of nothing. Might I bring your attention to this? A splayed paperclip housed upon a wad of chewed bubble tape.
Bubble tape?
Pretty clever marketing gimmick.
I agree. Much too clever to constitute nothing. I'm beginning to doubt your credentials, Mr. Pennington.
Now, there's no need to get nasty. How about some peanut butter smeared on a playing card? Nonsense! That's solitaire and a healthy snack all rolled into one. A discarded toenail?
Toenails is proteins, and proteins is good for the body.
An IOU from a distant cousin. Money in the bank to be paid off later. Well, now, I hate to admit this, but it looks like everything in this store does actually have some measure of value. To think what I've done with my life. I may as well just give it all up.
What did you say?
I said you're right. Everything here has value. I'm just going to give up.
By golly, that's it. Giving up. Honey, can you believe it? We finally found it. The thing with absolutely nothing. It was giving up all along.
Giving up is the least valuable thing anyone can do. Cheers, Mr. Pennington. Cheers. You really mean it?
Of course we do. We've been searching for something of no value for years, and you finally delivered for us. Thank you so much.
How much do we owe you for the giving up? $375 cash. Sold!
And now, back to the show.
This is also, when we get back to the film, this is where his war buddy Paul calls. This is the large guy who sort of froze in place, and he's actually real. He meets Jacobs at the bar, says he's seeing things too, and they're being watched by that guy. I forget. I think he said his name was David. I just called him Young Egon because he looked a lot like Egon Spengler.
Who is this?
Sisters. But either way, the guy that's like watching
Michael.
over him, like shows up.
Yeah.
Michael, that's what it was. Yeah, not
another
David,
biblical
Michael.
name though.
Yeah.
Michael the
Yeah,
Archangel.
I call
and
him
all
Young
that.
Egon.
Right, yeah.
He looks like him. Yeah. And we get this is what this film does all the time that's so weird, okay? Is even if you are going to be a mindfuck film and nothing ever happens, like, why do you constantly introduce a story element and then within 3 to 5 minutes completely negate it? It's not even like you set it up early and then we revisit it a couple times and then by the end it turns out to be bullshit. They're just like, here's a thing, actually here's not a thing. So like this scene, for example, you could have very easily had us meet up with Paul at a bar earlier on and then he kind of goes away and we come back to him. But they literally are like, hey, I'm your buddy Paul. Shit's going on. Let's meet at the bar. Okay. Meet at the bar. Weird shit's going on, yeah? Yeah, okay, let's get out of here. And then he goes and starts his car and explodes and is gone. Like, why wouldn't you stretch that out over the course of the film to get us to go down that path? If you're trying to be a red herring film and pull a series of gotcha moments on your audience, like lead us down effectively.
This is where I'm going to have a problem with this
Lead us down that rabbit hole, get us invested.
I get the letting go, great beyond, life flashing before your eyes narrative. I get the demons and angels fighting for his soul or what he perceives to be those things as he's learning to let go. Okay, get that. At what point does he go down a legal battle in his last moments of his life and like come to terms with his Vietnam friends? Like, where is Paul coming to him? And then like, how would he know about the ladder with Michael coming to visit him while he's on? Because like, remember, at this point in time, Jacob is being life flighted out of the jungle or even in a hospital trying to be resuscitated and have his life saved by doctors. And as this is going on in reality, in the real world of Vietnam in 1971, his future life is flashing before his eyes in certain ways. Okay, great. But then how would he know about the ladder? Is the ladder real? Do you think? How does this Michael character visit him from 1971's Vietnam into his narrative of 1975 Manhattan to explain to him how he died in 1971's Vietnam, only for him to rejoin his buddies to try to figure it out in 1975, to then sue the army, only for them to back down for no reason, because then they're like, yeah, we don't want any part of that shit, do we? Okay. So this is where it gets really misconstrued for me. Just lean into the weird shit at that point. Why are you trying to narratively have this like weird drama going on with your non-buddies? All that shit is just like a red herring that not only isn't happening, but couldn't happen.
Yeah, no, the only thing I could think of is that it's supposed to be a reflection of, so basically in the imagined story, his buddies would come together, but then in reality they don't. And so I thought that was maybe some sort of allusion to the reality of like the soldiers are supposed to come together, but then they ultimately don't. They end up turning on each other. But again, it's a real weak thread if that is what they were going for. So regardless,
let me ask you this
done effectively.
Let me ask you this: do you think the ladder is real? Jacob's ladder. Do you think the LSD that they were poisoned with, the experiments?
It's the drugs. The ladder is just the name for the drugs that they gave them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is explained to him and us by proxy as the audience. That is explained to him by the narrative device of Michael. Do you think Michael is real?
No, Michael's not. Michael's, because Michael only exists in the made up narrative.
Okay.
Michael doesn't exist back in Vietnam. Or if he is, they certainly don't call attention to him.
Okay. So because Michael's the one that in Jacob's, before death dream is explaining what happened. Well, he's giving the exposition dump of the LSD and like how that he was hired, and he goes into this whole thing, and I was just a kid and they brought me out and told me I was going to do this, and they saved me from, 30 years in Rikers and blah, blah, blah.
Well, Ryan, let me just interrupt you because you are familiar enough, and I'll ask you again, think of it biblically. Who's Michael?
The archangel.
Correct. Right. So now here's the thing. So I think that this is, again, I think there's a lot of remnants in this film from the original script that don't play effectively because of Lyne's changes. And this is why I was critical of them at the top of the show, even though to some degree they work, because again, I think that piecing it back and looking at what the film could have been and what it tried to do, Michael was probably supposed to be like Jacob's guide. Right, to the afterlife and trying to
I
show
do
up as
believe
the
Michael
voice
the
of
archangel reason. In the biblical terms is like a messenger of God. I think he comes. Exactly. He's the one that like will come to people in visions and stuff like that in the Bible.
Yeah, and so I think that in that respect, it's supposed to be that character. I think that this Michael is trying to guide Jacob to ultimate acceptance and help him navigate this twisted afterlife to get to a place of acceptance so he can move forward. But again, the film doesn't explore that. The script does, or what the script might have been, and that's where I think these discords come into play.
Got it. So this is just a loose thread that was left hanging. That
I believe so.
Because
yes.
and there's a I do know that there is a deleted scene where Michael then takes Jacob back and offers him an antidote for.
Did you see it? Did you watch it?
I did. It's trippy as fuck.
It's amazing. I loved it. I was like, dude, this should not have been an alternate ending. This should be the ending. This is a dope ending. Way better than the one they gave us.
Yeah. Yeah, because then like Jacob then thinks it works, and then all of a sudden we find out that it doesn't, and the whole thing starts unraveling, and it gets super trippy. And
there's a giant demon that comes from the ceiling, and like blood's dripping on his face, and he's got like we see all these eyes, and it's this alluded to being a very sort of Lovecraftian horror from beyond. And
it almost had like a Clive Barker feel to it for a minute with like the teeth and stuff. It's like
that was such a cool sequence. It's like, dude, like if you had just done more of this, I would have liked this movie a lot better because again, like narratively, there's no meat here. It's all just a figment of the imagination, or it ended up being that way because you removed so many elements that might have been more resonant from the screenplay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, to your point also, I know you mentioned earlier that the head effect reminded you of the Edvard Munch Scream. But interestingly enough, it was actually another painter's work that inspired that. And I was not familiar with this gentleman before looking into this film, but there is a 18th century painter, and his name is Francis Bacon. He was actually a Chancellor of England, if I remember correctly. And he would do these portraits, but he would have the faces sort of be split and distorted and not clear. And so the visual effects supervisor was familiar with Bacon's work and approached Lyne about wanting to do this effect. And Lyne said, sure, go for it. And so that's where they came up with the imagery. How they executed it is they very simply shot the actors moving their heads around and doing the motions at 4 frames per second, and then just sped it up to 24 in post.
Nice. Yeah, it worked out
so
great.
Simple but
that
effective.
Kind of stuff I love.
I love it too, where it's like, dude, it's so simple. Like anybody can do that. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be a special effects wizard. You just have to consider like, oh, if I shoot at a slower frame rate and then, speed it up in post, it'll do some weird shit. Let's see what that looks like.
Dude, I'm looking at Francis Bacon's paintings right now, by the way, and they're sick.
Yeah, it's pretty good work. It's really cool. Now, Jacob from them is brought to a decrepit hospital. That's sort of where we get some of the horror stuff, where we see these bloody body parts on the floor, and the doctors strap in and they sort of say that he's dead. By the way, I will say I do give this screenplay credit for story elements, but I will say a lot of the dialogue is still super clunky. And I doubt Adrain Lyne manipulated much of that. So, for example, when the doctors strap him in, and this is just a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The doctors strap him in and they look at him and they say, "You're dead." And then he looks back at them and he says, "I'm not dead." And then the doctors look back at him and say, "Then what are you?" And he looks and he says, "I'm alive." And he's like, "Well, yeah, that's the opposite of dead, bro." Like, I was waiting for this poetic, rebellious type thing, and it's like, that's just literally the clunkiest, most on-the-nose, basic bitch response you could have written.
Yeah.
So, even just, "I'm a man," or anything, literally anything other than just the exact opposite of what the other character said. So annoying. So, and then, that's where we get some cool effects, gets a syringe to the forehead that's kind of gross, and he wakes up to the ex-wife and kids visiting. And
dude, that whole scene was sick. He's like on a gurney strapped down, and they're like pushing him through this long corridor, and he just keeps getting scarier and scarier. You like lots of close-ups of like the wheel shimmying on the gurney, and it's like running over dismembered body parts and guts and shit as they're getting back to it. But these are the moments that I'm here for. Like, I wish they would have leaned into a little bit more of that. And, or at least if they were going to get into the emotional beats of him saying goodbye to his family, like, I wish those moments would have hit me harder, because they certainly didn't.
Yeah.
It just
and again,
cheesy.
This is a perfect example of where the echoes kind of remain, where I think that Louis breaking in and busting Jacob out, again, this is more supposed to be a battle for Jacob's soul, if you will, right? And so these doctors could represent these evil demons trying to take Jacob, and then Danny Aiello's character, Louis, who is, again, supposed to be playing the angel. We see that by the fact that, first of all, he, again, in another very ham-fisted exchange of dialogue, he literally calls him an angel in their first exchange.
Right.
But then we also see Lynn and the cinematographer, whose name eludes me, they put the halo of light behind him and shoot him very bright. And then, that contrasts with Jezebel getting like the black contact lenses and things of that nature. So again, I think that when you break this scene down, it was originally supposed to be like the sort of one of the final battles for Jacob's soul, where the demons are taking him and Louis busts in and saves him and in turn saves his soul. But with all of those elements stripped away and unexplored, again, you just get these remnants and echoes of things that ultimately, with what we are presented as the finished film as it stands today, are ultimately kind of just these incoherent threads that don't really fit together anymore.
Yeah. Some of that too, as we're getting kind of winding down on this discussion, had to do with the music. It was done by composer Maurice Jarre. I'm probably butchering his last name. He is French, so we're going to go with Jarre on this one. But this is the guy that did, I just talked about this guy a few weeks ago, because he did the music. His first feature film was Eyes Without a Face. And he crushed it on that. I really enjoyed it. And then he went on to go be David Lean's guy and did Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia and all these epic films. So this guy's got like a lot of clout. And this, because of Adrain Lyne, I guess it just kind of felt like super 80s sultry kind of, I don't know. It was really dulled down. I thought some of the intense moments, scarier moments and emotional beats could have been leaned into a little heavier. I felt like the score was kind of flat in this, just like the cinematography, like what you're saying. Everything was kind of just like toned way down, dialed way down. It just, this whole movie kind of, and then Tim Robbins' performance, everything kind of fell flat for me, which is really pissing me off because, like I said, all the ingredients are here. Everything's on the table to be a dope-ass movie. A guy dealing with his last moments in death, with angels and demons fighting over his soul, as he's left to grieve over his lost family and come to terms with these last moments and categorize all of it. And then we in the audience, as the audience, are left in the balance, kind of watching all this play out. Cool. I'm in for all that.
Sounds like a great movie right now.
That sounds like a great movie. And yet this is kind of what we got.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. And I think, though, at the end of the day, I'm going to put it on Lynn's shoulders. And I think that he is
We're in the minority, by the way.
Really?
A lot of people do love this movie. Yeah. I was going, watching a lot of reviews and going, on a little deep dive about this, and everyone gushes about this film. So
interesting.
Fuck us.
Well, we can go ahead and wrap up the narrative description here.
Sure.
Because we have Jacob. He goes to meet who I call young Egon, Michael. They go to a safe place. We're told that this guy, Michael, learned how to synthesize LSD. Government found out, recruited him, and said, if you don't develop this super synthesized LSD super aggression drug, we're going to throw you in jail. So he does. They tested on the platoon, and it turns out that it worked out too well to the point that the soldiers were so manic and crazed that they killed each other indiscriminately, just turned on each other. This drug is called the ladder, hence Jacob's ladder. Bit of a stretch. Ladder is a lame name for a drug, by the way. That was totally reverse engineered, 100%. At which point we see that Jacob returns home to find his son. And again, we get that callback to the angels or devils being visible and thinking that's a really interesting story point and wishing that they would have examined that a little bit further. And then we get the final shot, which I wanted to check with you. The film doesn't deserve to be analyzed to an insane degree, but in the very last shot, we see Jacob dead on a military gurney, but that wasn't Tim Robbins, right? That looked like Jeff Winger from Community on that gurney.
What?
Yeah, it was not Tim Robbins on the gurney. And
Shut
I don't
the fuck
know
up. Really?
Because I had to go back and rewind and watch again because I wasn't certain. And yeah, it totally looked. Why am I blanking? Who plays Jeff Winger on Community? What's his name? Joel McHale. I totally thought it was Joel McHale. And
well, Joel McHale's not in this movie. He would have been pretty young, but carry on.
Yeah, no, but it was someone who looked like him. But my point is, it's definitely not Tim Robbins. And so, I don't know if that was supposed to be some sort of Jacob wasn't really Jacob the entire time, right?
Oh, dude, if that's the deal, I hate this movie even more now.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like that was something where Adrian Lyne totally over-engineered the ending and wanted to do something super smart in his own ideas and totally just screwed the entire thing up even more. But yeah, if anybody listening knows what the hell was that about, and Ryan, by all means, please go back and rewind and watch that. If I'm mistaken, call me on my bullshit, but yeah, so we
don't you make me rewatch this movie, Jason. Don't you make me rewatch this movie.
But yeah, I do really wish we would have.
I do think it was Tim
original...
Robbins, man. I'm gonna hold tight and say that really? Was I think we just went back to Vietnam era Tim Robbins. I don't know.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, it was totally something else. Somebody back me up here. Call the hotline. No, just kidding. But I do really wish we would have gotten that original ending. With
it wouldn't have made any less sense than anything else in this fucking movie. So whatever. It was somebody else's dream.
Somebody else would have cared enough to actually justify that decision. Whereas Lynn's like, oh yeah, no, just throw it in there. We're trying to be mindfuck movie. Go ahead, throw it in there. Does it make sense? Who cares? Throw it in there.
Man, what if as we're wrapping this movie, this discussion up right now, right before it ends, I wake up. And this whole episode was a dream, and it was my dream, and I'm just like, oh, I got to get set up to record this podcast with Jason, and it just starts all over again.
I got to get set up to talk about
I'm you.
Talk about Joey's toaster. Do you mean Jacob's ladder? What's Jacob's ladder? I'm talking about Joey's toaster.
Man,
what is this world? Joey's toaster's a movie.
No.
But yeah, also just want to point out, Ryan, do you recall offhand the Simpsons episode where they make the Radioactive Man movie?
I do.
Do you recall the director character from that episode?
I do not.
We've got to do the Jiminy Jillikers scene again.
That's right. Yes. Is that Adrian Lyne?
That is so Adrian Lyne, to the point that I'm convinced that they actually modeled that character off of Adrian Lyne.
Wow.
Because that is his exact voice. The other weird thing, and I mean, again, I don't care. I've got a mouth of a sailor myself, but Adrian Lyne cannot go 7 words without dropping an F-bomb.
Yes,
that guy has
I did notice that.
Very, very dirty mouth.
I did notice that.
Yeah, even just instructing the makeup people, just put some fucking makeup on his fucking face or something. But in this it's austere English accent, and it's
sure.
I mean, I just it's
It sounds
seems like an
lovable when he says
interesting
it.
Guy.
Yeah.
But it's just so weird because it's like, I don't know, it seems a little abrasive, or I don't know. He's a weird dude from what I can tell.
I can see why he kind of stays in the realm of sultry erotic thrillers for the most part. That seems like his wheelhouse.
And it was super hilarious because I just want to get this out real quick. I listened to the commentary track on this one as I do, which, by the way, oh man, Adrain Lyne, one of the 5 worst audio commentaries I have ever heard. The still to date following from our boy Nolan earlier this season, that's got to be the worst one that I've listened to. But this is a close second where he just spends the entire movie pointing out things that are happening on screen and then going silent for 5 minutes before he comes back. But the weird thing about it is I'm listening to him talk, and like there's very clearly edit points every like 3 to 7 words. And I'm like, I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, does he a lot? Is he one of these guys who's like, and it was like so distracting that they had to like go in and cut it out. And then I realized after watching behind the scenes featurettes, no, he has the mouth of a sailor, and that's all them going in and removing all of the profanity from the commentary track.
Nice. Yeah. Well done, Adrian. We salute you on that level. Fucking salute you.
So that brings us to the end of Jacob's Ladder, a film that I am happy to have seen and check off my list. Don't know that I'm going to be coming back to this one again. Before we get into our 3 adjectives and formal rating, we do want to encourage you to please rate, like, and subscribe on the old Apple, Spotify, and wherever you listen to this show. And please tell your friends, that's the best way to spread the word, is just word of mouth. But again, if you feel like, you want to do us a solid and leave us an iTunes review. I think we've got 10, and we've been doing this for 3 seasons, 3 years. So like, I don't know. I feel like maybe we should have a bit more than that, but not hanging my hat on our reviews.
Countless hours of my life gone. Review my life hours. Just let me know in a very Jacob's Ladder scenario that I did an okay job. Let me let go to proceed on.
Again, if you haven't left us a review, it'd be awesome if you did, but no worries if you don't. But again, do us a solid. Help us out. Ryan, let's go ahead and get into 3 adjectives. I will let you start. What you got?
Let's do this. I got vibes because, they're like, fuck your facts. How do you feel about it? And so I just went with vibes. The next one is combo meal, parenthesis, no substitutions. Because I feel like all the ingredients, like there are ingredients of things that I like here, but it's like, can I get that burger without mayo? And they're like, no substitutions. You're getting the goddamn mayo. So that's a bummer. I wish I would have had my burger without mayonnaise. I don't like that. And then the last one is dizzying, because it's I feel like I'm being spun around a lot, and then asked to open my eyes or take the blindfold off and then look at this and then put the blindfold on, and then I spin around a bunch, and then that's like the card trick, that's the whole thing. So if you like that, cool. I felt like it was pretty close to being awesome. But it was very dizzying. They wouldn't allow me substitutions, and they wouldn't give me any facts. They just wanted me to go on vibes. Jason, how about you, buddy?
For my 3 adjectives, my first is incongruent, as we talked about, just a bunch of disparate elements that didn't really belong together, but were still forced to be together over the course of this film.
Sure.
So that did not work for me. Plotting, I didn't really think it was an engaging film. It kind of just kept going, and halfway through, I was totally tapped out once I realized what was going on.
Sure.
And third is unaware. I really feel like, especially Adrain Lyne specifically, was just not aware of the impact and weight that all of these different decisions had on the final product, right? Whether it was the acting decisions from Tim Robbins, whether it was the creative decisions to change the script, whether it was the look of the film as it related to the feel of the film, all of these things. I feel like it was just these sort of indiscriminate decisions being made and not nearly looking at how that would all fit together the way that, say, Park Chan-wook did, a couple weeks ago with Oldboy, and really looking at, okay, I want this character to be something. How can we represent this mentality? Okay, let's add the spiderweb fabrics and patterns to his room and stuff. This was just like, let's just do this and see what happens. It felt like just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So incongruent, plotting, unaware. For me, that's all going to amount to a rating of, This is honestly a little bit better than I feel like maybe I thought it would, but it's not great. But 2 3/4 stars because there wasn't it's like I can't say it's a bad film. Like I didn't like it, but it's not like it didn't make me upset the way that like Tucker and Dale did or Wild Strawberries or any of these films where we like really hated it. Like it was more just. I probably should use this for one of my 3 adjectives. At the end of the day, it was disappointing. It was a disappointing film, right? Like I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. You're better than that, right?
Correct.
You didn't lay up and completely fall on your face, but like you're capable of a 9.5, and you threw up a 6, and so points off for you. What do you got?
This could have been great. Everything, like when I strip away all the bullshit and I gave it to you in a 1-minute bullet point edition of the plot, it sounds like a dope film. And
totally, I
think that there are parts of this movie that I was all in for. The gurney ride to hell, dope. Unfortunately, the deleted scene was pretty sick. What else do I got? The dance scene at the party or whatever, that was cool.
Yeah. Sure.
All the way from when he gets there and opens up the fridge and there's a skull in it. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, and the minutia, like when the nurse lady removes her little nurse hat and there's bones or some growth going on. All that shit is cool. I like the letting go premise. The story is cool. Just the execution sucked. And so as such, I'm going to give this a C.
All right. Yeah, not too far off there.
But I'm telling you, we're in the minority here. I'm sure there are listeners who are stewing in their seats, driving on their way to work right now, being like, "Fuck these guys! They don't know cinema." And they're right.
Well, no,
whatever.
I mean, we've always said that. Like if you're coming to this show to understand what the internet or what the world at large thinks about a movie, you're at the wrong show. There are only 2 people's opinions here that we care about, and that's Jason's and Ryan's. Oh, yep. Except for the third, which is yours, dear listener. And that's why we invite you to share that with us. And you can do so a few different ways. One of those is on social media through Instagram and Twitter at Esoterica Cinema. The other, you can send us an email, esotericacinema@gmail.com. Tell us what you think about this movie. Tell us what you think about our show. Tell us what you think about that delicious muffin that you're enjoying. We want to hear all about it. And if so inclined, you can even do so on the hotline. I would really love it if you did that because we'd love to have some call-ins to play for you. We never have any. It sits there bare and just, might as well have a tumbleweed going through it. But one of you, I'm certain one of you sometime is going to come through for me, and you're going to call 818-483-6285 and leave us a message that we can put here on the air. I don't know if this thing's going to be going on much longer, so you might as well call while you still can. Ryan, I think it's probably going to be shut down for season 4. I just have not gotten a lot of a response from it. But if any callers want to save that and call in right now and leave us some messages and we can flood the end of the season with some voice messages, maybe we'll keep it around for season 4. So you guys decide if you want the hotline or not.
Look, we see our ratings. We know you're listening. Like, there are people listening to this show. It's not like I'm just talking into the void like season 1, like there are people out there.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. So, but look, we get it, right? Like I used to get cards on the table, man. I always wanted to call into radio stations when I was younger, but was just afraid to. So, if you're not used to talking, I suppose it could be intimidating.
I get it. I don't call into shit. There are a lot of podcasts I listen to with the hotlines, and I never call, so I get it. I did call into How Did This Get Made one time.
That's nice.
I made it on the air. I asked what 80s had to do with ninjas and karate. 80s were obsessed with ninjas and karate. Like, karate could just solve everything. You solve everything with karate. Even turtles knew karate.
There you go. Absolutely. Now, we also have the website. That's esotericacinema.com. You can go ahead and listen to our last 4 episodes right there on the main page. There's also a link to a separate web player in case you prefer to play through your browser instead of any of the streaming platforms. Maybe you've got a grudge against Spotify or Apple for some reason. We don't begrudge you that. Totally understand. You can go ahead and listen through the web player on our website. And of course, the website is also where we keep our master list.
The master list.
We are going to our master list for the very last time. That's right. We didn't even mention this is the penultimate, second to last episode of Esoterica Cinema. We're going out strong. Has been a wonderful season 3. Have made a lot of strides. I love the films that we've looked at. I love the 5-minute reviews that we're incorporating. Really proud of the sketches we've done this season. And so I can't believe we're actually, getting ready to wrap it up and start to head into our off season and prepare for season 4, which of course we're going to have some new stuff for you. We always do. We don't really know what it looks like yet. We've got a few things that we're considering, but in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and for the last time, pull our master list. So go ahead, Jason, go to the website and esotericacinema.com and pull up that list. But, well, what's up, Ryan? I was just gonna go to our random.org site here and do the random poll.
Aren't we gonna go ahead and say fuck that random.org situation for our last episode?
What?
Because we've already
Would we do that?
Haven't we made a judicial decision, an executive decision of sorts, out of our selfish nature, since no one will call in and it's just you and me here. You're
Silly
here and
me.
I'm here.
Silly me. How could I forget? That's right. We are not going to the random.org true random number generator to select our last film. Ryan and I have decided.
We're going to the specific.org specific number generator.
Ryan and I have decided that we are going to wow you and select our last film of season 3 that we want. And Ryan, buddy, I will pass this alley to you. Oop that shit and tell our listeners what we're going to be watching.
We're going right to number 70, baby. 1977's House. Because I want to see it. I want to see it. And I've never seen it. And I want to see it.
That's right. We were like, dude, okay. What do we look at here? What are the types of movies do people seem to enjoy? It's like horror films and Criterion films are our 2 highest rated consistent like genre of film, if you will. And so we're like, dude, there's got to be a horror Criterion film on there. Scoured the list, found 1977's House from Japan. This is such a good film, so much fun. I've seen this film a couple times, but only saw it for the first time probably 2 years ago. Ryan has never seen this film. So we just really thought that there would be a great way to wrap up season 3. Ryan, hit our listeners up with that description.
Next week's film is summarized as, in an effort to avoid spending time with her father and his creepy new lover, young Gorgeous resolves to visit her aunt's remote mansion with 6 of her closest friends in tow, including the musically inclined Melody. Well, I see where they're going with that. And the geeky professor. Gorgeous arrives at the estate where supernatural events occur almost immediately. A severed head takes flight, household appliances come to life, and a portrait of a cat seems to contain an evil spirit. I'm all in for all those things.
Oh, dude, it's so fun. It's so over the top and silly and zany. This is like a horror comedy. This is like Japanese Sam Raimi, early Evil Dead type shit. It's a lot of fun. Apparently the guy, I don't even know that he made another film, and he was very renowned for sort of being a commercial director that kind of pushed the boundaries a little bit with visuals and did a lot of surreal shit. So,
Obayashi?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah. I'm not overly familiar, but yeah. So, I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. And I think that our listeners are going to really enjoy this film as well. So,
dope.
So everybody go ahead and check out Houseu. It's available online, or you can get the Criterion collection, watch it in Blu-ray, and come on back next time for the very last episode of season 3. We are going to put a button on this 20th film of the season before we gear up to come back even bigger, badder, and stronger for season 4. So once again, for Ryan Siebold and myself, Jason Peters, thanks so much for listening. We will see you next time on Esoterica Cinema. Enjoy the movies.